our relationship with our fellow man, and especially within the local body. And the two arms of the cross have two parts of the cross have often been used to illustrate our relationship with God, a vertical one, and the arm of the cross is our relationship with our fellow man. And today I want to look at how our relationship with God and our relationship with our fellow man are related, and how I can improve my relationship with my brethren. That's going to be the focus, how I can improve my relationship with my fellow man. I'm not going to talk much more about the two arms of the cross, but because I kind of got into that late in my studies. But one thing to remember is that, think about, of course, we should all have our lives on the cross, but so if we die to self, that will help our relationship with God and with others. But when there are difficult situations horizontally, remember who died on the cross. And it's really Jesus who will help us improve our relationships with our fellow man. This morning I'd like to read all of 1 John chapter 3. And I'd like to read this responsively. I'll read the odd verses, and I'll let you read the even numbers. And this is a very familiar one. I'm just curious how many of you, either when you were in school or are in school now, have memorized this chapter. Okay. So I'll read the first verse, and you can read the next one. Behold, what manner of love, and let's look for John. John is the disciple of love, or he talks a lot about that. So let's look for references to God's love, and the first verse is powerful in that, and for loving God and each other. So those three things to look for as we go through this chapter. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Beloved. And every man that hath this hope in him purifieth himself, even as he is pure. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. And ye know that he was manifested to take away our sins, and in him is no sin. Whosoever abideth in him sinneth not. Whosoever sinneth hath not seen him, neither know him. Little children, let no man deceive you. He that doeth righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinneth from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin, because he is born of God. In this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of God, neither he that loveth not his brother. For this is the message that ye heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous. Marvel not, my brethren, if the world hate you. We know that we have passed from death unto life, because we love the brethren. He that loveth not his brother abideth in death. Whosoever hateth his brother is a murderer, and ye know that no murderer hath eternal life abiding in him. Hereby perceive we the love of God, because he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoso hath this world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him?
My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth.
And hereby we know that we are of the truth, and shall assure our hearts before him.
For if our heart condemn us, God is greater than our heart, and knoweth all things.
Beloved, if our heart condemn us not, then have we confidence toward God.
And whatsoever we ask, we receive of him, because we keep his commandments, and do those things that are pleasing in his sight.
And this is his commandment, that we should believe on the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as he gave us commandment.
And he that keepeth his commandments dwelleth in him, and he in him. And hereby we know that he abideth in us by the Spirit which he hath given us.
Verse 23 talks about that we believe on the name of his Son and love each other as he gave us commandment. This message came out of something I read recently, and I'm just going to tell you right from the beginning here, this message is, I'm stomping all over my own toes. I was just really convicted, because it's easy for me to think and act independently. I enjoy working by myself because I can concentrate better, and it feels like I can get more accomplished. Maybe I have a hard time working and talking at the same time. But recently, in reading this newsletter, it's published by Anabaptist Savings and Loan, a part of Anabaptist Financial. I was convicted when I read one article, and it was on business limitations. And I'd like to think about church limitations or even personal limitations if we are independent. This is written for businesses, small businesses, Amish Mennonite businesses. Many everyday business activities work better, are more enjoyable, and become more efficient in a group setting. No doubt, certain stresses can be avoided if I'm personally responsible and complete certain activities by myself. That's the convicting part of the convicting part. However, many business activities are greatly limited when operated only by an individual. Each individual must recognize that one person is limited in time, strength, capabilities, and resources. As seen in the illustration above, one person carrying wood to a potential buyer is limited to a certain size and quality of wood, mostly firewood capacity. Well, you can say just need a machine, okay? That would be one alternative for those of us who like to work alone. The illustration below shows how 10 people with united goals can provide a more useful end product, a wide, long board that you would cut out of this log. In the business world, it's important to be very conscious of my own limitations and the products or services that I can provide on an individual basis versus the strength, quality, and stability that can be provided in a group effort. Proverbs 11:14 puts it in very excellent perspective. Where no counsel is, the people fail, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. It goes on to talk about the world economy where volume is needed, and if we want to have be able to produce something in large enough quantities on a regular basis. But then in the middle there, he says, as much as the Anabaptist culture enjoys its family farm, individual, small business heritage, reality is upon us. We do need to consider more of a group effort to process and market the goods and services produced in such settings. Often higher quality and better products are possible. So that admonition is good for an individual, but it could also apply to a church. One individual church is limited in how much they can do. So, but my focus this morning is more about our individual responsibility and focus in working together. I don't know how many of you have helped carry something like this or something heavy. Ladies, you probably maybe didn't do something like this, but I remember construction work, and I remember specifically one time we were doing a remodel job, and I'm not sure, was it a girder or something we had to carry inside of a house, and it was heavy. We couldn't get a lift inside, and there is a lot to be said about working together and carrying a heavy load. And we kind of joked about the fact that, we always want to put the tall guys at the end and us shorter guys in between, because, the tall guys are going to carry the load. And as I recall, that's probably why it stands out to me so much. I think I wasn't carrying my load, and one of the tall guys was feeling it. And it's still clear in my mind. There's something to really make this work. Now, they have cross pieces, so a shorter and taller guy can work there. But if you have, they're going to be walking over uneven ground. And at that point, there's certain people who are going to be, you have to adjust your load. You have to adjust how much you carry to be able to spread that out. And that's really the only way that you can carry something this heavy. And that's a lot like the work of the church. We need each other, and we need to be able to work together. I've had, if you've ever carried a piece of sheetrock, something 12 feet long, 5/8 sheetrock, usually I was never able to carry one of those by myself. And so you usually had someone else, one on each end. And you can fight each other because sometimes the guy in the end, he doesn't want to, he keeps it vertical, straight up and down. And the guy in the front it's really a battle, and you can get mad at each other. And really the best way to carry something like that, grab it at the bottom, flop it on your shoulder, and just go with it. There's a lot of things in life, in the church, like that. And but probably the main thing is being able to talk about it and to work together. So I would like to look at three ways. I have 3 points for this message. One is hindrances to loving each other, benefits of loving each other, and then ways to love each other. So the first thing I thought about hindrances to loving each other is independence, and that's probably why, because it hit me just so hard. There's something about being, you can do it yourself if you don't need other people. And we have that's why community is not nearly as important today as it was 50 years ago, because we work it out so we don't need each other. When we need each other is when we appreciate each other. We can say, I can do it all by myself. If I can do it all, if I can arrange it so I don't need someone else, then we don't need each other, because I can take care of myself. Sometimes we do that because we're not satisfied by the way our brother helps us. And sometimes we just don't want to be bothered or bother to help each other. Another thing that keeps us from loving each other is our varied opinions and preferences. It would be so nice if we'd all think alike, wouldn't it? Or would it? It'd be kind of boring. I'd hate to see how, I think I can honestly say this, if you'd all think like I do. But inside, we still believe it would be better, don't we? I can believe that way. Because there are backgrounds and family differences. There's just no way that we will think alike. And we don't really need to think alike. But we need to work together. We need to adjust maybe how we feel about our differences. I must not have, I didn't get all of my thoughts on paper. The next point under this, I just started with we. And must have, anyway. Another thing that can keep us from loving each other under our varied opinions and preferences is our pride. If you're married, think about your differences. I just imagine that you didn't think alike when you got married. You don't have to be married to somebody you're working together really closely with. Often we think, I have a right, it's pride really, I have a right to my opinion. We can say we do, and sometimes in marriage we think, hey, I've given enough on this side. It's about time I get my way. I'm sticking to my opinion. That doesn't always or often work out well. And it's not just in marriage. Another thing is a huge hindrance is in loving each other, and sometimes it can be hidden, is sin in my life. 1 John 3:11 says, for this is a message that ye heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. Sin can cause envy and jealousy in our lives, as it did in Cain. Or a hindrance can just be as simple as laziness. Sometimes we are just lazy and know how to avoid work, and sometimes we can make it look like we're involved without really pulling our share of the load. If we're on the job, we're at least carrying a shovel around. Looks like we're ready to pitch in any time. But are we really getting our shoulder under the wheel? Okay, now I'd like to look at benefits of loving each other. One thing, we can accomplish a greater goal, and I'll say it now, but I'll repeat it later on. This message is not about performance and just seeing how much all of the stuff we need to get done here in church. It's included, but that's not the main thing. But it does include that. We can get, and it's been scientifically proven just how much more two horses can pull compared to two horses pulling separate loads. And some of you know those numbers. But picture these two men carrying that log. If you do that, you have to have a plan. And you have to agree on a plan. And it's as simple as coming up to a tree if you're walking through woods like that. Okay, well, I think it's better over here on this side of the tree. But if you don't, okay, maybe someone in the front has to be, okay, why don't you tell us which way to go? Because if you don't, and you can imagine what's going to happen. You have to carry out the plan together. And we need to carry out the plan according to gifts as well. I talked about men. It works best if you have paired men on each side of the log that are the same height. And technically, it should be the difference in height should go either, well, probably the strongest one's on the heavy end, and then the height should go in a stair-step style, or otherwise you're going to have, it's going to be difficult. So it's easier when we consider our gifts, but and the stronger man should be at the heavier end of the log, and that was my justification back in construction. We were carrying that girder. I thought, well, he's a young man, he's a lot stronger, but usually we can just accomplish much more if we pitch in, even if our gift isn't as good as the one that's helping. We think, oh, he can do this a lot better. Go ahead and do it. That's not how we get accomplished the most in God's kingdom. And the ones with less strength should not slack, but do their share however they can. All of us have gifts. And we should put forth energy in what we are good at and be willing to help with the things that we're not so good at. Another way that we can love our brethren is just realize that it's more enjoyable in a group. And I'll say that some people enjoy group activities more than others. And for those who don't enjoy group activities as much, we should remember that it is, if we have we have a goal, a common goal in view, we can enjoy the group. Okay, ways to love each other. I mentioned that our relationship to God is important, and then our relationship to each other. First of all, the best way to love each other is, first of all, to love God. And we do that by understanding and appreciating God's love for us. If we don't realize that we are, the only reason we are here on this earth is because God loved us and sent Jesus to die for us. It's the only way we're going to have eternal life. If that's not even in our radar, then we really need to get it in our radar. We need to appreciate, we are sinners, and the only way that we are less than sinners and saved by grace is because of God's love for us. Hereby perceive we the love of God, because he laid down his life for us. We recognize God's love. And then we love God and follow his word. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. Are you comfortable with that? This is how we love. This is one way that we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. So our relationship, this is still looking at our relationship with God. Then we love in deed and in truth. It says that we should love. If we just say that we love God, and, oh, Lord bless you, but we don't get our hands dirty and we don't sincerely do it, then are we really loving God? Are we really loving each other? 1 Peter 1:22 says, and it needs to be a sincere love. Since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit in sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart. The sincere love here in the King James is unfeigned. Does it need to be said that we can fake our love for each other? No, I think we can. But our hands-on love needs to be sincere, and it needs to be with compassion and kindness. We should seek to understand and appreciate, even if we didn't have the same experience and that our brother had. I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. And that's one way that we can love each other, is by seeking to understand. We might never come to the same conclusions in how we do something. But if we try to understand why he or she thinks that way, it will help us to have an open mind, and will get us to work together. I think we should focus on things we agree about. It's easy enough to focus on things we disagree about. And there are lots of different ways we can do this. And I'll just say it again, I'm stomping all over my own toes as I'm preaching this. But try something just because your brother or sister likes it. Now, maybe I am. Just because your brother thinks a Ford is better than another vehicle. Oh, why don't you try one of those? Oh, I suppose that'd be kind of difficult for some of us. But that's just an example. And because when We need people liking all kinds of different things. There's no doubt about that, because some companies would go out of business if everyone would think like one of us, right? Not just in vehicles, but in lots of other things. Think about all the foods that would not be produced if everyone had preferences, food preferences like you do or like I do. But as we have an open mind, it can help us to just appreciate where others are at. And then hands-on love, in deed and in truth, is just working together. Like I mentioned, those 10 men carrying that log. Recognize that we're doing this for the church. We're doing church for God. And we'll enjoy it a lot more if we're doing it for God and working together as a body. Not doing it for myself or ourselves. So sincere love is very important. Another one verse here. Now the purpose of the commandment is love from a pure heart, from a good conscience, and from sincere faith. And this verse kind of sums it up. It's the second part of the two main commandments in the Bible. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The first one is loving God. So if we are sincere in our love, we will not be a fake, right? And so we should be careful what we say and how we say it. There's few things tear down relationships like overhearing someone tearing you down to someone else. Another way that we can love each other is brotherly love. Romans 12:10 says, be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor, preferring one another. This is family love. This is different than agape love that we're going to look at later. This is just how you get along as a family. Some people don't, but typically when there's another enemy, we do stick together. And it's just a bond that you have despite differences in a family. Agape love is best described, I think, in these several verses in 1 Corinthians 13. And I'm just going to read through here. This is from RSV. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Chew on those verses for a while. They get right down to the nitty-gritty middle of your heart. I'm just going to look on the last verse. Love bears all things. 1 Peter 4:8 says, and above all things have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. Oh, it's too bad that without grumbling is on there. Has something to do with sincere love. Adam Clark said, love conceals everything that should be concealed. It's not talking about sin or abuse. That's what can seem like this is saying, and maybe where some of the cover-up or lack of bringing things to light has come from. Love conceals everything that should be concealed, betrays no secret, retains the grace given, and goes on to continual increase. A person under the influence of this love never makes the sins, follies, faults, or imperfection of any man the subject either of censure or conversation. He covers them as far as he can, and if alone privy to them, he retains the knowledge of them in his own bosom as far as he ought. A censure is to express severe disapproval or condemn, criticize, castigate, chastise, berate, or revile. in our conversation. It shouldn't be a subject either of censure or conversation. Gossip is talking to others instead of talking to him, talking about someone or something that I'm neither a part of the problem or the solution. If we need to talk about someone's faults, we should first talk to that person before we talk to others. And before we do that, we should talk to God about him. I don't believe a church can grow and prosper if we regularly trash others to our friends. That is neither love nor sincere. But we should still be gracious and kind to someone we struggle to love and appreciate. It's not an excuse to, well, I just don't feel like loving that person, so I don't want to be a fake, so I'm just going to tell him. We should talk to someone, but we should talk to God first until God changes our hearts and shows us the love that we start recognizing and appreciating the love that God had for us, and then we can extend that to others. It's the two arms. Love is a risk. Are the brothers and sisters in this church worth that risk? Love bears... So being a child, this is my disclaimer now. Being a child of God is more than service and doing things in his name. And many times God's name has been dishonored by the lack of love among his so-called children, and there are our churches. But when a group of people love God with all their hearts and are able to have united goals, God's name will be honored and his kingdom will be enlarged. Something I thought about sometime, or I thought maybe wasn't sure if it's a message or not, but what would you do? How would your relationship with God be shown if you would be a paraplegic and you couldn't talk, you were everything except being in a coma? How would you, I believe you can still be a Christian. What would be in your heart when you couldn't express it at all? That's because sometimes we just really try to, and I think we should express our relationship to God by the things that we do, especially as a body. But just doing things does not make us a Christian. So we need to have the right order for doing things. So here is a video that I found of they're Amish people who are moving a large pole building. And look for everybody working together, and look for this person in front there is slow. So I'm going to shut the audio off for the rest of this. Look at them moving over uneven territory, uneven ground. That's, according to my calculation, it's like a 45 by 72 building. And some of you know how many semi-loads of material that's going down the field there. Like some people are walking backwards at the end, and they can't. Like I said, sometimes it's easier to carry things when it's right here. Some of those had them down here. Some of them had up here. Sometime later here, they're going to switch. We're going to get a view from the front, and At one point, you can see that there's a man standing on the inside above the heads of the men inside, probably to give instructions to the people in the back, because they couldn't hear the man outside giving directions. But there's something really, really beautiful about this project. They walked a long ways. They did stop to rest a while. Now, look at the men in the little door there. When they started, they weren't wearing coats, but now they're two different sizes. See, you can see the man on the inside and through the big door, standing up high. Now, look at the two men in the small door. It looks maybe one is the boy and his dad, but pretty soon here they're going to. The tall guy is just not. He can't, and they have to bring that end up, and he's going to be really struggling with picking it up, and just before they go down, he's going to go down like this because he can't reach it anymore. And that's sometimes, watch it right here is where it's going to happen. The man in front is still giving instructions. See the tall man without a jacket, he's really struggling. And here just a little bit he's going to go down. He's going to try to pick up to help as much as he can, even though see him go down? But then they stop and get a break. When you do projects like that, when we do work in community, there's something that has to happen. We have to decide it's worth it. And sometimes, I suppose some of us are thinking, oh, there'd sure be a lot better way to do this. But that's an amazing accomplishment. They even turn perpendicular to how they were carrying it, and then that's when the screen stops, or the video stops. I hope to get the thing level. Guess everything will run to the back end if they don't. So, what a way to do church together if we can work together toward a common goal like those men did. I think there may have been 300 men in there. I don't know, a lot. There was some hard work in there, and there's a lot of preparation. But that's really how people know that we are his disciples, if we love each other. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father God, sometimes we just almost think it's not worth it.